Hi, and welcome to this series where I'm going through the IT service management activities and practices. I'll be giving you the main headline points, the main base foundation knowledge that you need. I'll also be discussing some of my real world application of these activities and practices in various organisations I've worked within. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, click the bell, you'll get the updates. Okay, so let's get to it. Today I'm going to be covering off a balanced scorecard, and this is a 101 view on life. Lots of companies, lots of organisations use them, and it covers pretty much all sectors in terms of business, technology, industry, government organisations, not-for-profit organisations, and it's a global activity. It's a disciplined management framework and it's a system. It helps align day-to-day business activities to the organisation's vision. As the word sounds, balanced scorecard, it helps management of strategy to get a balanced view on life, a balanced view on the performance of the organisation, and then it scores it. Balanced score. It's useful for goal setting and then executing the definition of particular tasks and the delivery of it, and then it creates and fine tunes existing measurements and metrics. It covers 4 views, and those views are called perspectives. The perspectives are the financial take on life, the internal take on life, the customer view on life, and the learning and the innovation side. It's worthy of note here that clearly one of the perspectives is financial, really important, but there's also quite a lot of non-financial items in there as well. So it is, as the word says, it's a balanced view. You get the 4 views, the 4 perspectives on life within your organization, and then you embark on an activity of creating goals, creating plans to be executed and delivered, and metrics. It's a holistic view on your organization. It allows you to join up how are things working, really, how are they working? So not necessarily what perhaps a monthly service report a manager might be giving you. It's really how is it working. It helps clarify your vision, your strategy, and then it converts those into actions that you can do. It drives performance. It puts the KPIs that you may have, or even if you don't have them, this activity will help you create KPIs. But it puts it into a perspective view, and it's also really useful to flush out some of the KPIs that perhaps you already have in place. But it really does push on some of those questions as to why are we measuring this? Why is this a KPI? More to the point, is it the right KPI? So it does help in terms of guiding you on your KPI journey as to are they the right KPIs you've got in the first place. So using a balanced scorecard helps flush some of those out. It helps your company keep moving. Go forward, not backwards, is definitely part of a balanced scorecard's view on life. So we've talked about the 4 areas: the financial, the internal, the customer, and the learning and growth and organizational capability there. It's a strategic planning and management system. It's used to help communicate, to align, to prioritize, and to measure. So you're communicating what you're trying to do. It aligns the BAU stuff, the business as usual stuff, the keeping the lights on stuff, in terms of the strategy overall, and that in turn helps prioritize some of the products or the services, or maybe there's ad hoc projects that are in flight. It helps prioritize those, and clearly it measures and it monitors towards those objectives, to those end points. I really like a balanced scorecard because it can flush out some of your measurements and your monitoring elements as to why on earth are we measuring and monitoring this particular KPI. Perhaps you're going to be lucky if you go through a balanced scorecard exercise, all of your KPIs are absolutely spot on. My experience, there's definitely been questions and head scratching around this KPI. What's it actually doing? What's it helping us doing? Are we just measuring it for measuring's sake? So we know these four perspectives, and it flushes out questions. So when we talk about the customer perspective, for example, think how do your stakeholders, how do your users, how do your customers see you? How do they really see you? So perhaps as a service provider, you could think along your service management, your service relationship managers. Perhaps if you've got a service desk function, maybe it's a technical service desk, maybe it's a non-technical service desk, who knows, but as a function, that's a good way of that's a definite touch point as to how your customer is going to see you. If they've got a problem, they contact the service desk. That's usually their first port of call. How do they see you? Knowledge management perspectives, these improvement activities, continual improvement. What are those? What's the perspective there? So the first question is around how do your customers, how do your users, how do your stakeholders see you? The second question, it comes from the internal perspective as to, okay, what should we be top drawer at? What should we be really good at? What should we be the best at? What are those items? And that's where you put your internal perspective. And then the innovation, the learning perspective, a question you would want to be asking yourself is, how and what should we be doing in order to continually improve? Really importantly to that is, of those activities, are they creating value? So how do we continually improve? And as I say, think about that value bit in that question. And then from a financial perspective, depending on your sector, maybe there are donors, maybe there are funding partners, maybe there are shareholders. How does your organization look from that perspective? And there will be lots of measures and activities that, there's going to be return on investment in there, for example. So when you think about a balanced scorecard, I suppose just some really kind of summary thoughts on a couple of those dimensions. When you look at financial, for example, clearly staff and resourcing is a big element there. So what's the head count? Is that is that really showing the true head count? Have you got some contractors in there, for example? What about retention? What about attrition? How's your staff retention? What about productivity from a staff perspective? Again, just think holistically when it comes to financial performance. Perhaps the internal performance. What about satisfaction? How timely are activities happening? What about the compliance and the provisioning activity, or your quality of ticketing? So if you have a tool of some kind, maybe you have an ITSM tool that manages information that's coming in. How do you have a QA process there? Is there an activity that looks at perhaps call recordings, for the sake of argument, where you would listen to calls and judge the quality? Maybe you've got a checklist of some kind where you're looking at accuracy, or perhaps some of those softer skills, empathy as an example. Growth and improvement areas as well. So if you have a knowledge base, is that growing? Is it increasing? So these four factors: financial, internal, customer, and your sort of your innovation piece, if you like. Make sure you think through what those elements are. I worked in a number of organisations where I've put scorecards into place, and it's really important that you start to drill down into your KPIs. So as an example, an organization I worked for many years ago, it was a SIAM model. It was a service integration and management type support model, and we had our four different perspectives. The financial and the service provider management was in that financial section. So there was information around percent of cost overspend of licenses, or the percent of invoices that were correctly processed. These were KPIs, or also cost reduction activities as well. So the percentage of the cost reduction in a maintenance cost. The customer part, as you might expect, we would have the CSAT scoring. So how good was that what were the results coming back? How effective were they? Things like priority 1 and priority 2 incidents, those are major business impacting customer outages. So we would have a P0, for example, or a P1 or a P2. So we looked at the end-to-end element of that in terms of the resolutions. Those are really kind of front end from a customer perspective. And then business level agreements, service level agreements of key business applications, for example, or accuracy. So when the customer contacted the service desk, were they assigned correctly to the correct assignment group? So there was kind of quality element there. We had a collaboration view as well. So because it was a SIAM model, there was a number of service providers in the ecosystem. So we would look at the percentage of vendors that were attending SIAM structural elements. So there would be strategic, tactical and operational elements. Change advisory board springs to mind. We would make sure in the ecosystem how collaborative were the service providers. Did all of those service providers attend those structural elements, the change advisory board in particular at the time? And then things like when we would onboard a new service provider, what was that lead time? And then we had an innovation and transformation perspective, which looked at things like the continual improvement activity. So we would have a continual improvement register. We would look at the schedule and how many of those have actually been well, A, turned into a project, and B, completed, most importantly, completed successfully. There were things like value saving elements in there as well from an improvement and availability. So if we did a continual improvement activity, we would absolutely be focusing on the value, but we'd be looking at what was that amount? Was it a tangible or a non-tangible value saving, and what was it? So some parting thoughts around a balanced scorecard. Make sure when you put your scorecard together, you are aligning to your organization's vision. There's no point in going small on this. You need to go big. It's useful for flushing out your KPIs in the first place. So if you have KPIs in the first place, great, do the balanced scorecard activity. But I'm pretty sure when you look at some of your KPIs, you're going to start scratching your head a little as to, why are we doing this particular KPI? There's going to be some of your KPIs you're going to look at and just think, I'm not sure why we're actually doing this. Are we just doing it for the sake of reporting? So what? What does it actually mean? Is it really aligning to your organization's or your customer's vision? So it's good for flushing out your existing KPIs, and it's good for putting fresh new KPIs in place. It is a balancing act. It's not an easy activity. You do to try and balance four things and get four different perspectives on life equally is difficult. It is a balancing act. The other point, and I speak from experience here, having done balanced scorecards for a number of years, the activity in itself can be resource heavy. It can take quite a lot of time. You do need to think through and just balance the value that you're going to be getting out of doing a balanced scorecard versus you know, the effort that it takes to do it. So again, an eye on the value creation piece. You do have to balance it. It will take a lot of time. There's a lot of activity there. You've got to make sure your KPIs are accurate. Just that in itself can actually take some time. You may have a value of some kind, but is that correct? You may start disappearing down holes in terms of making sure that your inputs into this process are actually correct in the first place. But it is time and resource heavy, so you must balance that. What are we actually going to get out of this? Is it worth doing it? And then when you define your goals in terms of a balanced scorecard, do make sure you do create meaningful and achievable action plans. There's no point in just creating a load of goals without having any meat behind it. You need to be able to have some action plans. You need to have something to work towards in order to achieve these goals in the first place. Don't end up, and I have seen this in lots of organizations, don't end up measuring just for measurement's sake. Make sure you've got something tangible there. When you set that goal, what's the action plans? How are we going to do it? How are we going to execute this? And then what are the metrics? What are the KPIs behind that? Okay, thank you. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and please check some of the other videos out. Thank you.